Progressive lawmakers mark 9/11 with calls to do better and learn from our mistakes. Biden maintains 125,000 refugee cap for fiscal year 2023. 73 Palestinians die in Israeli custody due to medical negligence. Afghan girls take to streets to protest school closure. Film A Sarajevo Safari sheds light on shocking truth about Bosnian war. From our Chicago studios, this is a Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana, Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. On Sunday, some progressive U.S. lawmakers renewed calls to learn from the war on terror and discriminatory policies that followed the September 11, 2001 terror attacks. Nationwide, remembrances mark the 21st anniversary of the attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania. New York Democratic Congressman Jamal Bowman said while remembering the dead, the nation must also remember how September 11th sparked intense Islamophobia. He urged we must continue to do better and learn from our mistakes. The Congressional Progressive Caucus tweeted, "The nation is remembering families grieving loved ones lost that day, as well as communities targeted with hate and harassment for their race, religion, or national origin." The caucus said the U.S. responded to the attacks with 2 long-term military campaigns, torture, and countless civil rights and liberties violations of Arab, Muslim, Middle Eastern, Sikh, and South Asian people. In related news, anti-Muslim sentiment has grown in the United States in the years after the September 11, 2001 terror attacks. From 2000 to 2009, hate crimes against Muslims spiked 500%. However, Muslim Americans' political and cultural clout has also grown in the past 20 years. In 2020, 71% of the 1.5 million Muslim Americans registered to vote cast a ballot, according to Mgage, a Muslim American civic group. That's due to an expanding voter base and record numbers of Muslim American candidates running for office at the local and national levels. Wael Al-Zayat, CEO of Mgage, said the community adopted a more affirmative agenda, engaging in political discourse and becoming an active voter bloc. But the challenges of an exponential rise in hate crimes, bullying, harassment, and racial profiling since September 11th continue. President Joe Biden has recommended the U.S. maintain its cap of 125,000 refugees allowed to resettle here for the upcoming fiscal year, the State Department said. The limit would take effect in the 2023 fiscal year, which begins in October. It will address growing humanitarian needs, including more than 100 million people displaced globally, State Department spokesman Ned Price said. Climate catastrophes and spiraling conflicts have contributed to a surge in refugees worldwide. As well, Russia's war in Ukraine has led to more than 7.1 million Ukrainians seeking refuge in neighboring European nations, UN data show. The U.S. has admitted just 19,919 refugees as of August 31st. The Economic Policy Institute, or EPI, a progressive think tank, says everyone is obsessed with quiet quitting when they should be reflecting on the quiet fleecing of workers. A post-pandemic phenomenon known as quiet quitting is a new trend characterized by workers performing only their basic job requirements and no more. Yet the defining trend of the past 40 years has been quiet fleecing, where workers go above and beyond but don't get paid for it. Between 1948 and 1979, the nation's economy and working class wages grew in tandem. There was a 118% increase in productivity during this 31-year period, mirrored by a 107% increase in typical worker pay. Wages began to flatline during the 1970s crisis of stagflation. However, the gap between productivity and typical worker pay has widened dramatically. EPI reports net productivity rose 61.8% from 1979 to 2020, while hourly pay increased by just 17.5%. U.S. Special Forces are providing military training to YPG-PKK militant groups in the Al-Hasaka province of northeastern Syria, local sources say. The training is taking place near the city of Al-Malikiya, close to the Turkish-Iraqi border, sources said on condition of anonymity. Many U.S.-made Bradley armored fighting vehicles were used to teach the militant groups about the use of light and medium weapons. U.S. helicopters also did reconnaissance flights in the training area Tuesday. Turkey has long objected to its NATO ally providing weapons and training to the YPG-PKK, which it considers terrorist groups. The U.S. says it is allied with the group to fight ISIS militants. The film Sarajevo Safari sheds light on a shocking truth about the Bosnian War. Details after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
My wife, she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it, and spread the word, because the wisdom is there, so I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. Sarajevo Safari, a documentary by Slovenian director Miran Zupanic, uncovers shocking details about the Bosnian War of the 1990s. The film is about rich foreigners who paid money for the opportunity to shoot civilians in the besieged capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina from the positions of the Serb army. It was showcased at the Al Jazeera Balkans International Documentary Film Festival. The 5-day festival boasted a slate of documentaries from around the globe. The festival aims to encourage writers and documentaries dealing with social phenomena focusing on universal human values. Sarajevo Safari director Zupanic told Andalu Agency the filmmakers worked on the project for more than 3 years, mostly spent looking for witnesses. He first heard about the safari phenomenon in February 2019. The film was compiled exclusively from the testimony of 3 people who were victims of snipers. Iran has slammed U.S. sanctions targeting the country's Ministry of Intelligence and Security while denying involvement in a July cyberattack in Albania. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani said the fresh sanctions will not cause any hindrance to the ministry's personnel. On Friday, the U.S. Department of Treasury accused the Iranian ministry of conducting malicious cyber operations against the government and private sector organizations globally. The July cyber attack targeted government websites in Albania. The latest sanctions came 2 days after Albania severed diplomatic relations with Tehran and ordered Iranian diplomats and embassy staff to leave within 24 hours. Kanani dismissed the allegations as false and baseless. At least 73 Palestinians have died in Israeli custody due to medical negligence since 1967, a local NGO said. The Palestinian Prisoner Society said the latest victim was a Palestinian woman, Saadia Farajallah, who died in Israeli custody in June. The group said Israel is holding the bodies of 9 Palestinians who died in Israeli custody. According to the NGO, 600 ill Palestinians are still being held by Israel, including 200 who suffer chronic diseases. Among the detainees are 23 cancer patients, the group said. According to Palestinian figures, nearly 4,550 Palestinian detainees are in Israeli jails. That includes 175 minors and 31 female detainees, along with around 700 Palestinians held without charge or trial. On Friday, an Indian Muslim journalist was granted bail 2 years after his arrest by the Northern Uttar Pradesh State Police. Siddiqui was arrested in 2020 while on his way to report on the death of a lower caste Dalit teenager days after she was gang raped. He was charged with conspiracy to incite riots and granted bail by the Indian Supreme Court. On September 14, 2020, a 19-year-old Dalit woman was gang raped in the state's Hathras area and died of her injuries 2 weeks later. The case triggered widespread outrage and protests nationwide. India's caste system divides Hindus into 4 main categories. Dalits fall outside of this caste system and are regarded as untouchables or socially excluded from upper caste Hindus. Kappan worked for a regional Malayalam language news website and had been imprisoned since October 2020. Dozens of Afghan girls in Paktia province protested after Taliban authorities shut their schools just days after classes resumed, local media reports. An estimated 3 million secondary schoolgirls have been shut out of school for more than a year now. The Taliban has reneged on its promise to allow women's education and job opportunities. It has imposed curbs on women's rights, similar to when the regime was in power between 1996 and 2001. At the time, women's education was banned and women were banished from public life. A senior Taliban leader told Al Jazeera the group is working to create a safe environment for girls and women in secondary schools and the workplace. The death of Britain's Queen Elizabeth II last week has prompted an outpouring of reflection and reaction globally. But some young Africans are sharing images and stories of their elders who endured a brutal British colonial history during the Queen's long reign. Many people took to Twitter to say the Queen's death should be seen by the royal family as an opportunity to return the jewels taken from their countries. A Twitter thread by one account calls for the return of the Great Star of Africa. Participants on the thread discussed the Coleen diamond, the largest uncut diamond in the world, mined in South Africa in 1905. The jewel was presented to Edward VII. The diamond was later cut into several smaller ones. The largest piece was called the Great Star of Africa and is part of the Queen's scepter. A widely circulated WhatsApp message shows Queen Elizabeth wearing jewels people believe were stolen from different countries. Many Arab kingdoms in India, however, are mourning the Queen's passing despite their colonial history. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Rise up. I'm gonna make a difference. Rise up. Take back what's mine. Give Power to the people. Some dreams never die. Can I get a witness? You know that it's right. 'Cause we gotta rise up and teach the world to unite.
Welcome back. It's time for our in-depth analysis segment. Let's watch.
Mike Rawlins was a special agent in charge of FBI in Washington, D.C. when the whole 9/11 happened and investigation and all that. He told us that FBI has interviewed 700,000 Muslims in America. And he says that none of those interviews revealed any information whatsoever which could have helped FBI prevent 9/11. He actually says your community is one of the cleanest community he has seen. Well, we have another FBI agent, a former special agent, who says there was an information which FBI had, and the person was in the detention before 9/11, that might have prevented all of this. So welcome, Special Agent, former FBI Special Agent, Coleen Rowley.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to Muslim Network. Tell me do you believe that 9/11 was preventable?
Well, it's not only Coleen Rowley who believes that, but the 9/11 Commission assessment was that there were at least 10 different ways of having prevented 9/11, one of which was the case in Minneapolis involving a terrorist suspect who was taken into custody on August 16th, and later, of course, was connected to the 19 hijackers and the masterminds of the 9/11 attacks. However, Rawlins's headquarters thwarted the Minneapolis agents from getting permission to conduct searches that would have shown that Zacarias Moussaoui, that terrorist suspect, already in custody, was connected to the plot. Again, that's only one of 10 different ways. The easiest way to have prevented 9/11 was for people like Rawlins to have read their memos that were coming to them. Rawlins claimed after 9/11 that he had not read a memo dated April 2001, 5 months before 9/11, that was entitled Chechen terrorist leader Abu Khattab and Osama bin Laden are entwined in planning to attack. So he's afterwards, it was addressed to his name along with 8 other assistant directors. He said, I never read the memo. And that essentially was the story before 9/11, that many of these officials either didn't read their intelligence memos or in fact, they read them and just claimed they didn't see them afterwards.
So, Coleen, is there too much workload on this supervisors of FBI that they are not reading such a critical information?
Well, I don't know. I think some of this is there's no mechanism to even track what was seen and read. That's a lot of the problem. And I don't think it was ever corrected. It turns out that George Tenet claimed, even the head, the director of Central Intelligence, and he actually was privy to almost all of these pieces of info, including the Moussaoui case. He was briefed on August 23rd or 24th, fundamentalist extremist learns to fly. Okay, so he was briefed already in August, and later he claimed that he did not know about some of these pieces of information as well, and he could not explain why he didn't act on the information. So again, it's not me, it's the 9/11 Commission itself that found that there was a failure to share information up the chain of command inside agencies, but also between agencies. The CIA did not let the FBI know that 2 of the hijackers had come into California. They knew that for a long time. They'd been tracking this group for 2 years, and they never told the FBI anything about this until it was too late. And then the other thing was the 9/11 Commission said it was a failure to share information with the public. And so media outlets like your own media outlet, really the mission is to share information with the public. Because in many of these cases, it's the public that actually prevents the terrorist act from occurring. Even in the New York Times bomber, that was people walking by the car that saw smoke coming from the car. The shoe bomber, the underwear bomber, they were all stopped by members of the public and not by the FBI. So it's even important to share this information with the public, but instead there's an excessive secrecy in government. And what we now know, of course, after the launching of the misbegotten wars in the Mideast, is a lot of this is to cover up deceitful propaganda. It's also to cover up failures and their own problems and agendas, secret agendas that are going on. So they put secrecy on this information, which actually should be shared much more widely, not only with the agency personnel, but also with the public.
Well, Coleen, you're saying that the wars were essentially cover up for the failure here, but is the interview of 700,000 American Muslims in some way you found was part of that cover up? Because those people who did that, 19 hijackers, they were foreigners. They were spending their time in bars and prostitution rings instead of mosque, but it were the mosque which came under attack and the American Muslim community. So what is the correlation here?
Well, first of all, I'm not surprised that this hundreds of thousands of Muslims that were contacted didn't know things. I think most of them probably had no knowledge about Islamic extremism or Al-Qaeda. I think that was probably true. Almost none of them would have known. There might have been a few, and certainly the ones that stood out like sore thumbs in flight schools. Most of those were probably not, those would have been Americans, not Muslims. They would have been, flight instructors and things like that. You're right. Maybe some others in mosques, and it might have been that some people in mosques, but I think that would have been a small number. And if they didn't land on the right people, they would not have learned about 9/11 that way, because of course, when you have a terrorist plot, it is held closely by the members of the conspiracy. Now, there were Saudis. I think the one thing that is still coming out, because the 9/11 victims have never been allowed to get the truth. They've also been thwarted by the FBI, especially from not knowing what happened. And even the 9/11 Commission left out a huge part of the intelligence. So there were some extremists that in the Saudis that were apparently helping the terrorists. And now there's a lawsuit. It took an act of Congress to get this lawsuit, but we have our fingers crossed that maybe some truth will come out from that lawsuit about who actually did know about this terrorist plot ahead of time and kept their mouth shut.
Now share with us if after the 9/11 Commission report came out, that information sharing was not in place. Did that situation improve?
For a little while after 9/11, there was a greater sharing of information in the government. They actually made some of these databases more widely available to even lower echelon. But after WikiLeaks, when information came out about war crimes and the torture program, all of these things that came out, then the government did the exact opposite. They instituted something called the so-called insider threat, and they also started prosecuting whistleblowers. So if you were a whistleblower about drone assassination, the torture program, the mass surveillance, which by the way included mostly mass surveillance of Muslims, if you were a whistleblower about those programs, you were put in prison. And so they also made secret everything. So they're not sharing information anymore inside government. They went backward, right back to where they were. I forgot to mention that George Tenet, who was at the top of the whole intelligence agency, knew a lot of things. In fact, the Saudis were briefing him on their knowledge of Al-Qaeda movements. And yet he did nothing, and he claimed that he was other people's jobs. It wasn't his job. So, we really need more truth at this point.
And that is, we're talking 20 years after the fact here. So what was your role when you were FBI special agent in Minneapolis? Were you part of discovering this Mousavi guy or arresting him?
I was the legal counsel in the office. And so the agent, I was not an investigator of the Mousavi case, but I was called that night after they began their investigation. They were so suspicious, they called me at home at about 9 o'clock at night. And they were wondering, as a legal question, if they could do a so-called emergency warrantless search of Mousavi's belongings. And of course, the wisdom, it's actually correct. We should not be doing warrantless searches when you have time to go to a judge and get it authorized. So I told them that piece of legal advice, and those agents knew from the start that they had a terrorist suspect. They wrote up a draft emergency declaration pleading with headquarters for an urgent surveillance that would include a search of Mousavi's belongings. They also got information from France that confirmed their worst fears about Mousavi. He was working for the Chechen terrorist leader who was entwined with bin Laden. And then our headquarters claimed that they couldn't do anything. They claimed that this was not enough information. Officials like Robert Mueller, the director, and even Rawlins essentially lied and told the public that there was nothing that could have been done. And again, when you know the real pieces of information that existed, the clues of other terrorist suspects in flight schools, if you know that there was a hijacking of Air India where Al-Qaeda had gotten access to the cockpit 2 years before the 9/11 attacks, that had already occurred. And yet our FBI headquarters refused to really warn the FAA, the Federal Federal Aviation Administration was warned, but they were warned in a weak way. Because if they had known this, all they had to do was direct the airlines to lock the cockpit door. The very easiest way to have prevented 9/11. And of course, it was done after 9/11. Israel was already locking the cockpit doors. Very easy thing. And again, this had already occurred even before 9/11, where Al-Qaeda suspects had reached the cockpit and hijacked an aircraft. An airline. So, I mean, this is egregious that officials like Robert Mueller and Rawlins would have put out publicly that there was nothing that they could have done. I really need to add, what they did do is they used 9/11 to launch all of these wrongful, illegal programs, one of which was mass surveillance and sting operations on innocent Muslims. They did this all over the country. Of course, they also launched the torture program, and they launched wars in the Mideast that had nothing to do with the attacks. They were successful in getting 70% of the American public before the war in Iraq. They were successful in getting 70% of Americans to believe that Saddam Hussein was behind 9/11. Even though Saddam Hussein was an enemy of Al-Qaeda. I mean, it's amazing what they were able to do in an opportunistic way to exploit the trauma of 9/11. But 20 years later, the families of the 9/11 victims still don't know the truth. And they're still begging and pleading with FBI to give them the documents. The FBI now claims they've lost a lot of the key photographs and other evidence.
Coleen, if you were to be FBI chief today, what are the things which we need to do to ensure that America is safer and the rest of the world is safer from us?
I think the first thing I would do as an FBI director is I would give some public talks, and I would really ensure that everyone understands the truth of what happened and really the horrible way that this was exploited. I mean, because if people don't understand this, if you remember after Vietnam, there was something called the Vietnam Syndrome, which meant that Americans became educated about that war in Vietnam. They found out that it was not justified. The Gulf of Tonkin was concocted. They found out things. Daniel Ellsberg released the Pentagon Papers. Walter Cronkite went public. And so this little time period where people understood the truth actually then kept wars from happening for a little while. Now, so that's the starter. People in the United States still to this day don't know the truth about 9/11. And so that's the first thing I would do. The other thing is I would actually fix some very easy bureaucratic mistakes whereby officials, when they read intelligence memos, important intelligence memos like the one that Mike Rollins saw in April of 2001, that they cannot later say, I never saw it. I never saw that memo. The Phoenix memo went up to headquarters and it had a supervisor's name on it. After 9/11, he says, I never read that memo. And so that's the first, it's so easy to fix. You think about millions of people having been killed in the wars, trillions of dollars spent, all the destruction. And you know what? I don't think the agencies ever made it so that they can tell who reads what intelligence memo. I mean, that's incredible. And that's really that's what the 9/11 Commission said. It was a problem of sharing information. And then afterwards, people don't tell the truth about it. And so these are easy things to fix. And then, of course, there would be a whole bunch of things that you could fix to make reduce terrorism. In the United States now, we have domestic terrorism that is just going steeply up. Mass shootings, for instance. Well, a lot of this is because the country became militarized, teaching little boys to play video games, Call of Duty and shooting. And then they wonder why someone who's addicted to a violent video game goes into a school. The Newtown shooter, this young man, he was addicted to violent video games and he went and shot all these 5-year-olds in a school. And that's not uncommon. We have a lot of militarized people now. They're very senseless, mass shootings. They just get a gun. They go to a church, to a mosque, to a public place, to a concert. And if they get a truck, they run over people, or if they have a gun, they shoot people. And this is actually now a big problem for the United States, but it all comes from having militarized, used 9/11 in order to launch all these wars, claim that American snipers are heroes, this kind of propaganda that's occurred. And it's going to be hard to reverse at this point because all the movies and all the rest, it's going to be hard to reverse, but it has to reverse. Otherwise, we're going to continue to go in this route, and it's really, really bad and dangerous.
Thank you so much, Colleen Rowley. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.